Okay, welcome back everyone. And in this video, I am going to be reviewing the 1980s Strat-O-Matic tournament that I played. This is on the National League side. This is the Special Teams Series set that Strat-O-Matic released. Basically, the same idea and same format as my American League tournament that I did my last video on, which the 1989 A's advanced and won that tournament, and they'll be sitting around waiting to see who wins this tournament. However, the execution of this tournament was a little bit different because from the 1980s in this special team set, unlike the American League, which had 10 teams in it, the National League only had six. So let me just run down those six teams real quick for you. From 1981, we had the Los Angeles Dodgers. From 1984, we have the Chicago Cubs. From 1985, we have the St. Louis Cardinals. From 1986, we have the Houston Astros. And also from 1986, obviously, got to have this team in there. We got the 1986 New York Mets. And finally, from 1988, we have the Los Angeles Dodgers. So I found myself in a position where I kind of had to add a team to this tournament because I did not want to put a World Series champion like the 1988 Dodgers in a position where they would have to play a one game play-in game. Because you may remember my last video with my um, American League tournament, even though I had a World Series champion like the 1987 Twins, um, they were ranked where they had to play in the first round. However, the first round of my series is a best of three with all games played at the higher seeds park. So that was basically the position that I wanted to have the Dodgers sitting in. So what I decided to do was, since I had the 1980 set anyways, I added the 1980 Phillies to the tournament. Now, at the time when I sat down and played this series, I had not bought the because I don't think it was available at the time. I did not have the 1982 set, so I guess I could have added like maybe the Cardinals to the set um, or to the tournament. I also thought about adding maybe the 1980 Astros or even the 1980 Expos to the tournament, but I didn't want to go too heavy or all in with multiple teams from 1980. So I figured out this was the best way to kind of format this tournament. So the way I have the ranking set up based on my point system, and you may remember from the last video, it is 3 points if you win 100 games, 6 points if you win the LCS, and you get 10 points if you were a World Series champion, with overall tiebreakers being winning percentage or number of wins in a season. So the way the teams rank in my 1980 Strat-O-Matic tournament goes as follows. Coming in at number 7, we have the 1984 Chicago Cubs. Coming in at number 6, we have the 1986 Houston Astros. At number 5, we have the 85 Cardinals. At number 4, we have the 1988 Dodgers. At number 2, or excuse me, at number 3, we have the 1980 Phillies. At number 2, we have the 1981 Dodgers. And of course, at number 1, top seed, the 1986 New York Mets. So here is how the tournament will break down. In this tournament, we are going to have a three-team play-in where the first game will be the 1984 Cubs at the 1986 Houston Astros. The winner of that will play the 1985 Cardinals in St. Louis. And then the winner of this little play-in round between these three teams, they will play a best of three at the 1988 Los Angeles Dodgers. And then from there, we will obviously go on to the semifinal round. So here's how the bracket breaks down. At the start of the tournament, you can see Chicago Cubs at Houston Astros. Winner plays 85 Cardinals. Winner of that moves on to the best of three at the 1988 Los Angeles Dodgers. Same idea where the first playing game is, let's just say it's played on a Monday, then the next day you play a second playing game, and then the next day starts the best of three. So once again, my reasoning behind this is so that you can't have a team like, for example, the 84 Cardinals ride one great starting pitcher all throughout a tournament like Rick Sutcliffe, or the Houston Astros can't ride Mike Scott all the way through this tournament. It's really going to be a test of teams' depth, not only in starting rotation, but also in the bullpen. So once we get past the first round, which is a best of three, then we get into our best of five semifinals. In one semifinal, we have number three Philadelphia Phillies taking on the 1981 Dodgers. And in the other semifinal, we have the number one ranked New York Mets waiting to see who they play. And then my National League Championship Series will be as well a best of five. So, with that said, let's get into the results of this tournament and let's see who's going to be moving on to play the 1989 Oakland A's. Okay, so let's go through this tournament game by game. Again, just like I did in my video on the American League, I won't be going into detail or really breaking down the games like in the videos I do on these best of seven series matchups that I do. Just going to go through these games just so you could see the results. In the first play-in game, 84 Cubs at 86 Astros. Great pitching matchup. Rick Sutcliffe and Mike Scott. The Chicago Cubs are able to win that one by a 6-3 score. So the Cubs are moving on. The Astros are out. So the Cubs move on the next day to go play the Cardinals, and you could see they score 4 runs in the top half of the ninth inning to break a 2-2 tie and take it 6-3. So the seven seed, lowest seed in this tournament, the Chicago Cubs, move on to the first round by winning 2 games on the road. Now, keep in mind, again, I go back to why I set the schedule up the way I do. It's so that teams cannot ride one great pitcher throughout the early parts of the tournament. So the Cubs win the first playing game, they win the second playing game. Those are played on consecutive days, and then they go into a best of three, all played in consecutive days. So the 84 Cubs go into the best of three playing the 1988 Los Angeles Dodgers, and knowing that Rick Sutcliffe will not be available earliest until game number three. Obviously, the Cubs have to get one of these first 2 games against the 1988 Dodgers. So let's take a look at what happens here. So in the first game of this best of three between the Cubs and the Dodgers, you can see Oral Hershiser goes all the way in a 2-1 win. So Cubs got a really good pitching performance out of Scott Sanderson, but were not able to get the first game. So in the second game, with the Cubs facing elimination, they have Steve Trout on the mound, and he's going up against John Tudor. And the Dodgers were able to take this one by a 4-1 score. Again, very well pitched game by Dodger pitching. John Tudor goes 7 innings, and Howell gets the save. So the 1984 Cubs are out as they lose the first 2 games of the best of three against the Dodgers. So the 1988 Dodgers will move on to play the top seed 1986 New York Mets. And in my other semifinal, best of five series, we will have the 1980 Phillies taking on the 1981 Dodgers. First semifinal, let's stay with the 88 Dodgers, taking on the 1986 Mets. Now, keep in mind here, because the Dodgers were able to win the first two games of the best of three, and that I give one day off between the end of the first round series into the best of five. Remember, the Dodgers actually had 2 days off because they were able to win the first two. So think of it this way: the best of three would have started, let's say, on a Wednesday, and then game two of the best of three was a Thursday. Well, no game Friday, day off Saturday. So Dodgers are actually set up pretty well going into this series against the 1986 Mets. The 88 Dodgers are able to throw Oral Hershiser out there in game number one of this best of five, even though he is pitching on 3 days rest. They do have him ready to go for the first game. However, you're going to see the Mets are able to get that one by a score of 4-3. And I pretty much knew right then and there that the Dodgers were in a lot of trouble if they could not get the Hershiser game. Game number two, the Mets are able to take that one by a score of 5-4. And the Mets are able to complete the sweep by winning game three in Los Angeles by a score of 11-5. You can see this was a pretty crazy game as it uh, ended up going 14 innings. New York Mets score 7 runs in the top half of the 14th inning. Dodger bullpen was basically all used up by this point. So the 1986 Mets are moving on to the National League Finals, where they will sit around and wait and see who is the winner of the 1980 Phillies against the 1981 Dodgers. And in game number one, we've got Carlton going against Fernando Valenzuela. You could see pretty high scoring game here. Phillies are able to take it 9-7 in 10 innings. Second game behind Jerry Royce, the Dodgers take it by a score of 3-2. And then in game number three, Phillies take that one by a score of 3-0. And in game number four, the Phillies are able to take it by a score of 4-1. So there we have it. The 1980 Phillies are moving on to the National League Finals against the 1986 New York Mets. And just remember, because there was no game five in this semifinal series between the 81 Dodgers and the 80 Phillies, and I had Bob Walk pitch game four for the Phillies. That means Carlton last pitched game one of the semifinal series. So the Phillies rotation is set up to go up against the New York Mets. As well, of course, the New York Mets rotation is set up as well because they swept their best of five semifinal series. So again, game one, we've got a classic matchup here between Steve Carlton and Dwight Gooden. And let's take a look at what happened in the first game. New York Mets were able to walk it off thanks to a Kevin Mitchell walk-off 2-run home run off of Tug McGraw in the bottom half of the ninth inning. They're able to take it by a score of 6-4. The second game, the Phillies are able to take it in extra innings by a score of 4-3. So you can see through two games, we have the best of five series tied 1-1 as we head to Philadelphia for game number three, and two very competitive games so far. We move on to game number three, and in really what was one of the really big performances in this series. Ron Darling goes 7 innings, only allows 1 run, and the Mets are able to get a very important swing game here. The first game in Philadelphia, the third game of the series. They win it 4-1, and they have a 2-1 series lead as we go into game number four. So obviously here, what I decided to do, kind of managing both teams here, obviously with their backs to the wall, Carlton has to come back on 3 days rest for the Phillies. However, for the Mets, knowing that they have Dwight Gooden ready to go game 5, and game 5 will be back in Shea, I decided to run Sid Fernandez out there for the New York Mets. And the New York Mets were able to take it by a score of 5-4 with 2 runs in the 5th and 2 runs in the 6th. So the New York Mets win my 1980s Strat-O-Matic National League tournament, and they will go on to play the 1989 Oakland A's. Just a couple of quick thoughts about the tournament as a whole. Number one, was I surprised that the Mets won it? In short, no. That's obvious. The 1986 Mets were head and shoulders above every other National League team in Strat-O-Matic from the decade of the 80s. Now, again, keep in mind, I don't have um, complete sets from every year. In fact, from the 1980s, I have 1980. Now I have 1982. I did not have the 82 set when I sat down and played this series. And I have 1986. I only have right now 80, 82, and 86. So who from the other years would really be like a big challenge to the 1986 Mets that was not already in this tournament? I felt going into this tournament that the Mets faced two tough challenges, and that was in the 1980 Phillies and the 1981 Dodgers. However, because the Dodgers were the 2 seed and the Phillies were the 3, the Mets would not be set up to have to beat both teams to get through this tournament. And I guess I would have to say I think the 81 Dodgers could beat the 1986 Mets if everything is equal going into the series, meaning if both teams are able to, like for example, if game 1 is, Dwight Gooden against Fernando Valenzuela and both teams have their rotation set and ready to go. However, the New York Mets, by far the superior team in the National League for the decade of the 1980s. So my next video will be on my 1980s World Series, my American League tournament winner, the 1989 Oakland A's, taking on the National League tournament winner, the 1986 New York Mets.